Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Getting the Buy-in You Need to Launch an Effective Employee Recognition Program, sponsored by Bonusly and presented by Carol Fraser, Emily Chevalino, and Raphael Crawford Marks. This webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM credits. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. If you have any questions today for our presenters or for HR.com, please use the Q&A tab on the bottom of your control panel. And it's my pleasure now to turn you over to today's presenters.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to HR.com for hosting this online event. I'm Raphael Crawford Marks, founder and CEO of Bonusly. I've worked in the software industry for 20 years and in the HR tech space for nearly a decade. I've always been really motivated by the potential that software has to enable people to connect with each other and with their work more meaningful. And I think that creates a win-win situation for both employees and companies. And that's what's led me on this journey with Bonusly.
My name is Carol Fraser. I'm a subject matter expert in human resources and employee engagement. I've been an HR executive for over 20 years. I had my own consulting company for 12 years, and I'm currently an HR leader at a large healthcare organization in New York State. I've had the privilege to build HR programs in several public and private organizations throughout the world. As the field of HR and the employee populations have changed over the years, implementing programs for multicultural and multi-generational workforces that continue to recognize, reward, and retain top talent is crucial to the sustainability and the success of any size company.
Thanks. I'm Emily Chevalino, Director of Sales at Bonusly. I feel lucky to have found, purpose and growth in my career, and my goal is to help more people experience that by helping them build great workplaces. A lot of what our sales team does here at Bonusly is enable champions to get the buy-in they need. From my experience, change happens in an organization when one person starts to get the buy-in and convince other people that people are a good investment at their company. And hopefully we can share some of what we've learned today to turn you into that champion.
Great. So we're here to talk about the importance of employee engagement, how employee recognition impacts engagement, and how it will benefit your company's bottom line. And we've invited Carol here to join us today because of her extensive experience in building HR capacity and championing employee engagement initiatives, specifically recognition programs in large organizations. And we'd like to learn a little bit more about why all of you are here attending this webinar. So we're going to run a quick poll right now to get to know you, our audience, a little better, and we'll do our best to tailor our conversation to meet your needs.
Yeah, so we want to know why you're interested in this topic. So do you know you need recognition at your company, but need to convince your leadership team? Or your second option, you want to learn what makes recognition effective. Or last but not least, you understand the value of recognition, but you're not sure your company actually needs it yet. And if you have a totally separate answer, just let us know in the comments. We want to hear that too.
Hey, we're going to give it a few more seconds here. And we'll close it in 5.
I like it. This is really helpful context. A lot of you want to learn what makes it effective, and our other top choices, you need to convince your leadership. That's perfect. From here, let's get a little more context about why this conversation is important.
So a lot of you have probably read or heard about the future of work. It's a really common topic. It's been in a lot of headlines, but it's also a bit of a misnomer because the future of work that's being discussed in these articles is already here in the present because of technological, cultural, and economic changes many things that worked in the 20th century have changed. So the social contract between employers and employees, the expectation of employees, the type of work being done, the tools being used to accomplish the work, and even the workplace itself. For example, I am participating in this webcast from home today, and many employees at Bonusly work from home, and we have multiple offices distributed all over the country. So when you take all those things that have changed and combine them with a few things that haven't changed, like human psychology, companies are realizing that they really need to update their practices in order to attract, develop, and retain top talent. Carol, could you tell us a bit about how these changes have manifested at the companies you've worked with?
Absolutely. The globalization of our workforce is definitely a key component. We need to find ways to build effective engagement and recognition regardless of where people are located. I would also state that the social media has had a really big impact as well. It's really kind of changed the way that we communicate to one another. It really kind of outlines the have and have-nots, and I think that that generation has really influenced current and past generations on what they find to be acceptable and really what drives innovation to building the right culture for an organization. The employee experience is really integral to the culture of any organization, and obviously the best cultures are what drives the most profitable and productive results.
Great. So did you want to speak some more about investments into employees?
Sure. So, nowadays we do have a lot of technology, obviously. Even right now in my healthcare organization, we are upgrading our technology every single day. But the employee itself is really at the pinnacle of what makes a company successful. Without the people doing the actual work and working with customers, we really wouldn't be as successful as this company or any other company that I have worked with or partnered with to build the right culture for their company. I would say that, the employee experience, you have to really listen and recognize what the employee brings as a value proposition themselves to an organization. So you want to ensure that those lines of communication and the attention to how they like to be recognized are constantly being communicated to and listened to by leadership.
Yes, exactly. And something that we see a lot with a lot of organizations and have been talking about a lot is that it's really critical for organizations to create a great experience throughout the entire employee life cycle, from recruitment through termination, because that experience is shown to foster an employee population that is safer, healthier, more motivated, and more productive, which of course drives bottom line impact for the company. But a question we often get is, how do you know if you've crafted an excellent employee experience? How do you measure that? And there's no one way. You need to combine a lot of different forms of measurements, but there is one measurement that is key, and that all companies many companies are doing, and all companies ought to be doing, and that is measuring employee engagement. And that's a really key indicator of how well you have crafted your employee experience at your company. And Carol, how have you measured employee engagement or seen engagement measured at any of the companies you've worked with?
We do our annual as well as pulse surveys on a very regular basis. I know back in the day when I started my career some 27 years ago, it was about just having town halls or department meetings and trying to gauge exactly how engaged employees were. But nowadays, the technology supports reaching out to every employee and valuing every employee's voice. Whether the survey is 10 questions or 50 questions, each company is looking to really capture the voice of the employee, and then based on those results, build programs and processes, as well as rewards based on those results. So a strong response rate actually ensures that we are addressing the most prevalent issues in a timely manner.
Great.
Yeah, and there's a few, if you have high employee engagement, there's a few places where you can see that. In addition to a survey, you'll see the impact. I think probably the first things that come to mind for most people are productivity and turnover. Turnover especially is a really easy number to look at and know that will have a return on investment. But there's other places you'll see an impact as well. Employees that are engaged are safer, healthier, more motivated, innovative, and even take fewer sick days. So if you're looking to measure employee engagement, you might be able to look into these other indicators as well. Organizations that heavily invest in employee experience are 11.5 times as likely to be included in Glassdoor's Best Places to Work, and twice as often included in the American Customer Satisfaction Index. So that's just an indicator that engagement isn't just hitting turnover. There's a lot of places you'll see the impact.
Great. And now we'd like to hear from all of you in the audience again, and specifically learn about how your organizations are engaged. So here's another poll for you. So what percentage of your organization's workforce do you believe is engaged? And there's a few range options here. So one is less than 25%. The next range is 25 to 50%, then 51 to 75%. And lastly, more than 75% of your workforce is engaged. And lastly, there is an option for I'm not sure, if maybe you're not measuring engagement right now or otherwise unsure of how many of your workforce are engaged.
Again, I'll give it another 10 seconds or so, and then I'll shut it down.
Okay, very interesting. So it's a pretty even spread. So about a quarter of you say less than 25% of your workforce is engaged. Another third, so 34%, say 25 to 50% of your workforce is engaged. And then another third, 33%, say 51 to 75% of your workforce is engaged. And that is the vast majority of you. So if you add these up, it means more than half of you, about 58% of you, say that 50% or less of your workforce is engaged. And this is actually, as disheartening as that may sound, this is actually better than what we see for the whole country. Emily, could you tell us about what Gallup tells us?
Yeah, Gallup, we can benchmark these against Gallup. Only 34% of US workers are engaged. Given all the benefits we just talked about around engagement, productivity, retention, safety, and more, the good news is if you haven't gotten on board and updated your workplace to engage employees, you're in good company. A lot of companies are struggling to do this, which means that this is a real opportunity. It can still be a competitive advantage for you to invest in your workplace. And you're not behind yet. There's still a chance here.
Great, and these poll results and statistics from Gallup or just polls that you might do of your own organizations really help you get a benchmark. But even if your organization has put in a lot of work and has higher engagement rates than most companies, that doesn't mean that there's not still room to improve. If you were to take no more actions to improve engagement, your engagement scores aren't going to stay at the same level. Other companies are improving their workplace experience, their employee experience, and employees are sharing that information with each other on sites like Glassdoor. And so if you're staying in place while everyone else is catching up and passing you, that's going to result in gradually decreasing engagement scores. So it's important to be nurturing employee engagement and constantly curating your employee experience all the time. And when your employee engagement survey scores improve, the result is consistently better business outcomes. So this is an investment that directly impacts your bottom line.
At this point, you might be wondering when we're going to talk about recognition. We've been spending a lot of time on engagement. The reason is, without engagement, recognition really doesn't matter. The reason we care so much about recognition is that it's closely tied to employee engagement. Employees who don't feel adequately recognized are twice as likely as those who do feel adequately recognized to stay. And also, workers who reported receiving meaningful recognition in the past 7 days are twice as engaged. So that's why we spend so much time on engagement. If you're looking at how to get buy-in, it really starts with engagement in your organization.
Yeah, and Carol, I'd love to hear from you here. Is there anything you'd like to add about what you've seen in terms of the relationship between recognition and engagement?
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure most people would likely agree that when someone says something positive about you or your work, you really feel good and sometimes even great. Recognition is definitely a direct link in creating engaged employees. They generally have results of higher outstanding work, and they love it when it's highlighted and celebrated. The human nature is to continue to do the same or similar behavior when you see your coworkers being recognized. I can say from my own experiences with our surveys in several different companies, once we launched a more tailored and directed recognition program, our engagement of our employees definitely went up. They appreciated that they had an outlet and a methodology on being recognized for work that may have just been a pat on the back beforehand. But again, as I've stated before, with the new generation and the new technology around social media, they're really looking for more ways to be recognized, not only face-to-face or in your department, but even amongst your peers, especially in our work environments now that are so diversified and disparate as far as office space goes.
Great. Yeah, effective recognition can have a huge impact on your organization. It's not just a pat on the back. It can build trust and create a sense of safety, increase positivity, connect employees to their purpose and to each other, reinforce company values, encourage collaboration, and just boost overall happiness. But I do want to emphasize that this is effective recognition. If you make a case and pitch a program and you're only recognizing your top 5% of employees once a year, that's just not going to have the kind of results that we're telling you recognition can give you right now. Raf, do you want to talk a little bit more about what effective recognition looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And Carol, you alluded to this when you talked about launching kind of more tailored recognition programs. So we have taken a lot of time to think about what makes a recognition program effective, and have identified kind of 5 key components. And so effective recognition is both timely and frequent, meaning that it's given often and it's given soon after the behavior or accomplishment being recognized. If you do something great in January and don't get recognized until December, the effect of that recognition is virtually nil. And it might even be negative, because I might feel frustrated if I'm the one being recognized that it took so long to get that recognition. Recognition should also be specific to the behavior or accomplishment being recognized. That basically creates a positive reinforcement, so it encourages more of the good behavior that is being recognized. And so it's a way of actually getting more recognizable behavior out of employees and showing them what success looks like. Recognition should also be visible. There's research that shows that if an employee witnesses recognition between 2 colleagues, even if he or she is not a party to that recognition, their engagement goes up, because it feels good to be at a place where you know that good work gets recognized. And so even just witnessing that happening, even if you're not the person being recognized, can improve your employee engagement. It's also very important to create a recognition program that is inclusive. If only your 5% of top performers are getting recognized, or if only VPs and managers can give out recognition, that's going to really limit the reach of the recognition program. And so what you want to do is have a program that includes all employees, or as many employees as possible, as both recipients or potential recipients of recognition, as well as potential givers of recognition as well. And lastly, it's important to have your recognition program aligned with your company's core values. And so that can be something like when recognition is given, you tag or mention a core value in that recognition, or employees get called out for living your company's core values, because this can have a kind of a positive feedback effect where recognition can reinforce the core values, which then reinforce recognition and cause more recognition to be given, and really helps create and foster a values-driven organization. So this all sounds great, but ultimately, deploying a recognition program requires buy-in from your leadership team or executive team. And that's what this talk is about. How do you generate that buy-in to actually get a recognition program adopted and implemented? So Carol, you've driven the evaluation, adoption, and deployment of new recognition programs multiple times. How have you generated buy-in from leadership to adopt a new program?
Well, it's interesting. Early on in my career, somebody taught me that happy employees are productive employees, and productive employees means a profitable company. I know that probably seems old and antiquated, but at the core, it still pretty much is the same. We've just found different ways to make our employees happy and more productive. So, recognition obviously has a direct link to creating a positive work environment, and thusly there is a direct ROI to employee recognition programs. I would also easily outline the benefits through the results of almost all of my engagement surveys. Recognition, rewards, as well as effective communication are always the areas that the employee population really wants to see either improved or implemented. A solid, well-adopted employee recognition program really addresses all of that. And, when I'm sitting with my board of directors or the executive of the company, really showing them, there's so many statistics out there and studies that really show that the more engaged an employee is, and that recognition really drives a good component of that engagement, really helps to show them that in the end, whether short-term or long-term, you're going to see an increase in productivity, an increase in creativity, an increase in retention, all of which lowers your expenses and those things affecting your bottom line.
Great, thanks. And that sounds very compelling to me, but were there ever any objections that you had to handle, or concerns or fears that were told to you by the executive team or the board of directors?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger concerns, there's a couple, but I think ones that come to light are adoption, and really the buy-in. I would say, as you've stated here, every organization really has a mission statement or a value proposition. And in that statement, there's always a section that talks about the employee being a very valuable component to the company's success. We know that the employee is the asset needed to build and sustain a successful company, regardless of the industry, size, location. It's no longer enough to just offer median pay, an annual bonus, average benefits. Any company can offer that nowadays. The workforce today wants to be revered and promoted and acknowledged. And when we address those areas, we remind leadership that there is now this expectation of our new workforce and this employee population. So it's basically now a requirement to remain competitive for talent.
Great, thank you. So let's talk a little bit more about how you can show your leaders why your recognition program will be effective. And Carol just outlined, all these great ways that you can help both convince your executive team or leadership team or board of directors that this is important, and handle certain objections you might hear from them. And so just to sum up, what you want to do is provide the context that we provided, similar to what we provided, about employee engagement and recognition, and connect them to the strategic priorities of your organization. I mean, it is really as simple as happy employees are productive employees, and productive employees means a profitable company. I mean, that wisdom, it might be, old, but it is true. It's as true now as it was ever, if not more true now. Connecting these initiatives to your organization's stated goals and values can be very powerful as well. And as always, it can be very helpful to back up your argument with data. And there is so much data around the importance of engagement and of the power of recognition to drive employee engagement. Sometimes you might have an ineffective recognition program that's already deployed, and you might be able to reallocate budget from that program, which may be easier than allocating brand new budget and brand new spend. And then, as always, bringing it back to those bottom line benefits. That is something that the executives at their board meetings, they're accountable to the board for those bottom line, hitting those bottom line goals. And so tying them to those bottom line goals will be very persuasive.
Yeah, I want to elaborate a little on the switching from an ineffective program. As we've discussed, investing in the employee experience is a great investment. But I know on the sales side, getting a brand new budget is really hard to do often. And it's much easier to reallocate an existing program or an existing budget by demonstrating the existing cost. Program costs are pretty clear. Administration costs, often it's the HR team doing it. And so it's a hidden cost that the leadership team doesn't always know about, is how much time you spend distributing gift cards and whatnot. And many of the recognition programs are very high in these two areas, whether it's service bonuses, service anniversaries, annual bonuses, nominations. Nominations take so much time to sort through. Top-down recognition, they're very expensive, but don't necessarily see the results. So if you are looking to get a budget for a new program, highlighting what you're already spending and reallocating it is a really good direction to go. Carol, have you seen less effective programs that you've used that budget to update it to a modern program before?
Definitely. I mean, I worked for a global company where, again, because of our workforce today and because there are so many different offices or people are spread throughout the world, each office kind of has their own way of doing things and their own way of recognizing things and their own budget around that. So when you really do a holistic view and really try to pull all of those numbers together, you actually end up doing a couple of things. You reduce the cost, actually, most of the time, but you create a more effective, streamlined, consistent, scalable, sustainable, consistent approach to recognition that's better tied to the company's bigger values, pictures, goals, what have you. Obviously some expensive things are things like the employee barbecues. All of a sudden you're trying to throw a barbecue for 1,000 employees and you're thinking, is this really the best way for me to spend my money? We could do that from a potluck if you want to, as opposed to the company flipping the bill. Or the service awards where I'm getting, the tchotchke crystal for my desk. That was really effective way back when. But nowadays, it's not, as you guys have all stated, you don't want to wait around for that 1-year anniversary, that 5-year anniversary. It has to be something that's in the moment. So, what I would say is employees want immediate, real-time, as you've said, recognition for their efforts. It goes to even performance management or talent management, which is you need to recognize the wins in the moment, as well as, for those talent management moments where you have a concern, you've got to address it in the moment. We're a real-time culture nowadays. And I think that if you wait and hold your dollars, especially if you think about it from an annual bonus perspective, which is highly dependent on what the end result financials are. You have people who are working really hard all year long and praying that they're going to get a bonus at the end of the year, all to have a really horrible fourth quarter, and all that effort goes to naught. And we had sat there and accrued all that money, and we didn't give any recognition, and now we have no way of recognizing all their hard work and efforts, despite the fact that maybe we didn't make our numbers. So, trying to find things that are more real-time in the moment, even smaller, are more effective now with the culture that we have.
Completely agree. I would give that a standing ovation if I could. Yes, absolutely. Immediate recognition. I like your point about the cost of not having it consistent. That's a really good point. Another cost that you already have that you want to point out, again, you don't want to just have an extra cost without showing that you're saving the cost somewhere else. So the cost of turnover is very expensive. As most of you probably know, you're looking at empty seats, training, recruiting, just onboarding overall. And one of the big benefits of recognition is reducing turnover. And so that's a really good place to show your ROI. Usually just reducing turnover by, a few percentage points will pay for the program. If you're having trouble quantifying this, because like I said, there's a lot of different elements of turnover that will cost the business money, we actually have a cost of turnover calculator linked at the end of this presentation that can help you put that together for your company and present it. One more point on this. We have to convince the executive team, and they want to hear about budgets. Employee adoption is also very important. They do not want to hear about budgets. This is a separate strategy. You don't really have a program if employees aren't using it, though. So this is an important step not to skip. The more employees buy in, the better the program will be. Carol, what have you seen for getting employees excited to participate in a recognition program?
We've done a couple of fun different things. We've created videos and kind of allowing our leaders to make fools of themselves. That's always really fun. And really kind of put the energy and excitement around the launch of a new system. We've also, at one company, we did the strategy of looking at our organic leaders, those who are not, directors or vice presidents, but really the people on the ground who are innate leaders, and really piloted the whole program with them. Once they felt as if they themselves had been given an opportunity to have a voice in the type of program and the structure of the program, they then became the cheerleaders and went out and got the rest of the population excited. So, you get one leader excited, that's part of your coworker base, and the next thing you know, everybody's participating. I also think that it's important that you be as creative as you can. I'm currently working with my system right now. Systems, we have to be innovative and kind of reinvent ourselves all the time. And if you find that you had a great launch and then it kind of wanes a little, you have to kind of think about how to ramp it back up. So we've kind of taken it both online, offline, and we created a little flare, if you will, a pin that people can wear that drives them back to the portal. So if you happen to be a leader and have, accumulated XYZ points for the month, you become a leader of that particular element. We use behaviors, and then in turn, it drives people back to the system to get more involved in it. And we also created like lottery cards, scratch-off cards that you can scratch off and get points, which again, drives people back into the system. So the more that you can reignite, re-educate, and bring it out of just the technology into the people's workplaces, and then kind of create this circle effect, if you will, it really kind of helps to not only get it started through communications, through fun videos, through marketing materials, posters, but you have to kind of think about the longevity. You may have to kind of come up with things 1, 2, 3 years down after you've launched it, and how you're going to reinvigorate it.
I love that. I will say, you've gotten very creative. It's one of my favorite parts of people launching with us is coming up with a plan to announce it. Whether it's, I've seen parties and posters and road shows. So I love what you've done.
Yeah, if you
lots
can
of
get
custom
your
swag.
CEO in a Superman outfit, it works.
Yes, I'm going to use that one as we'll see how many CEOs we can get in Superman outfits. That's a great idea.
So we've just covered, the keys to driving adoption of the program by employees. Were there any other things, you mentioned getting, kind of organic leaders as well as official leaders to set examples or do silly things and poke fun at themselves to generate initial excitement, sharing videos. In terms of kind of, either initial adoption or ongoing usage, was there anything else, Carol, that you'd seen that had worked? Or is it more down to, program design being key to sustaining ongoing recognition?
Well, I think one of the things that's really key is supporting the leaders and really showing them that they need to walk the walk and talk the talk. We really want to try to see that our leaders from a giving perspective are on the leaderboard. So we want to see that the leaders are the ones espousing the program and really out there recognizing people and giving the points away, or giving even if it's no points, if it's just a recognition, we want to see them on the leaderboard as the givers. I think that is a really great way for both adoption and sustainability. If it wanes from a leader's perspective, then, if you've got the ramping and you've got a lot of people using it, then it kind of stays alive. But it also goes a lot to, going back to engagement surveys, we always tend to be challenged with really feeling that your leaders are engaged themselves into their employees. So this is just a great way to support the employee engagement. Again, if your leaders have really adopted it and are utilizing it, because then they see that their leaders are listening and doing just what they do. So they're one of us, so to speak,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so key to feel like it's so much easier to buy into really any company initiative if you see your manager and your leaders doing it as well. If they're not doing it and telling just you to do it, it always asks that question of like, why aren't they doing it? What's going on here? So great. Well, Emily, over to you to talk a little bit more and bring us home on driving that employee adoption of your recognition program.
Absolutely. I think you've actually covered a lot of this, but so one more thing I want to emphasize is just to piggyback on why champions and leaders are important. They can build the anticipation, announce it, send emails, hang posters, having them really be the messenger. But I want to emphasize that no matter how you do it, you want to start with the why. I think this is a huge opportunity for leaders to say what you do every day is important, and we want to make sure you're appreciated every day because you hold the company together. Don't miss the opportunity to say that kind of really meaningful message as you launch the program, and really highlight the benefits and why you're doing it. Transparency in a company helps a lot. If they know why it's important, they'll be more likely to buy in. It's also important to make it fun and easy. No matter how good your messaging is, if it's just totally separate from their workflow, kind of a drag to do, not engaging, people just won't use it. You want it to really just feel natural and social and interesting. It's much easier to have people want to do something than try to make them do something. And also, I think we've covered this, set a strong example, get those champions involved, get your leaders involved. People love to be brought into those kind of initiatives. We want you to be a recognition champion. So don't be hesitant to tap people on the shoulder for that. Carol, anything you want to add?
I would say, one of the things to ensure that you're driving the adoption is make sure that it fits your culture. You want to make sure that they're ready. The readiness and the change management is really a key component to consider. So you want to change readiness, I guess is probably the best way to put it. If they're ready to really move down that path, it should be pretty easy. Not super easy, but it definitely can make it a lot easier if you've really gotten the pulse of what your employees are looking for. I love your portion of start with the why. It's one of the biggest things in my opinion. Why would somebody feel this is good for them? If you can, as a leader and as a HR person, really understand the pulse of where the employees are, you're going to get adoption quicker.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful transition because we want to share a little bit with you about how different companies have customized it. So these are 3 companies we've talked to, or we've worked with. So Chobani, they have a really diverse workforce. They have offices, retail locations, and factories. And the way they brought it into their workforce is for the factory employees, which were the most challenging to engage with, they did kiosk in the break rooms. So they can't have their phone on them for safety reasons, but they can still go to the break room and use the recognition system. And then for retail locations, they can have phones. So basically, for each group of employees, they met them where they work. For Envision, they're completely remote. There's no office. They all work around the globe. And they brought recognition into Slack so that people could use it all the time. And Trend Analytics is, they've done some really exciting things as a Bonusly customer where they use social media to share when people get a lot of points and their top workers, and they actually have this public goal of hitting 100% participation in the program, which, just so you know, is really hard. There's always someone, on parental leave or on vacation, but they are shooting for 100% and using social media to do it. So you just have to feel out your workplace and customize it. Carol, what are some of your favorite examples of, tailoring a recognition program?
So one of my organizations had taken their recognition program and tied it into Yammer. So similar from a social media perspective, that allowed, if one person was recognized, it allows that ripple effect where other people get to kind of jump on board and recognize them as well. The other company that I had worked with is we had the same situation where people couldn't have their phones on them. So we actually kind of did a round robin. We took a cart and a laptop and we went around from department to department for those people who couldn't really do that, and just had a recognition luncheon where people could kind of go in and try to do things during their lunch hour. And, that way we were there to kind of give them some examples. It was what we did kind of at the beginning of it during adoption. And then of course we plop the laptops down into a central location afterwards. But it's really, again, meeting them where they are, which is literally going to where they are and saying, look, there's this great little thing that you can do now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, I've seen some really fun examples as well. And it's so funny that the thing with Trendalytics, now millennials are a majority of the workforce, and we're starting to see, the next generation after millennials, which is it called Gen Z, or I'm not sure if they have an official name yet, but they're make up a huge portion of the workforce. And just the fact that they're using social media and Instagram to encourage participation is something that, honestly, in building Bonusly, I never would have anticipated, but it just goes to show how powerful that social media that Carol was talking about has become. One thing I've seen at a few companies is, many companies these days, they'll be really into metrics or sharing news through digital signage. So these are kind of digital displays around the office. And I've seen several companies integrate their recognition program into their digital signage. So as you're walking around the office, you can see things like, Emily, thank you for teaching me this new, Excel formula. I knew
you were going to say that.
Faster. Yeah. It made me so much faster at generating this report. Or, so digital signage is great way to really make recognition visible and present, ever present throughout the office, and kind of share those stories of success and celebrate, the success of employees by sharing the recognition stories.
One of my other favorite ways people customize a program is what is actually recognized. So I think all our examples so far have been, about accessibility. But I've seen some really cool things where people bring in, wellness initiatives, every time, we do flu shots and bike to work, stuff like that. Or, for customer facing teams, if you get good customer feedback, giving recognition based on that. So really thinking about the types of things you want to reward in your workplace and then bringing that into the program.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's recap what we've talked about here. So, take it away, Emily.
Yeah. Well, first of all, recognition contributes to engagement, which supports business success, which is why this whole thing is important.
And recognition programs need meaningful participation in order to be effective. I mean, that's kind of obvious. If none of your employees are actually giving and receiving recognition, it's not going to be effective. And remember those 5 characteristics of effective recognition: timely and frequent, visible, specific, inclusive, and values oriented. And Carol, could you talk to us a little bit about ways to convince leadership by building your case with data?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of data out there. Use your own employee engagement surveys if you have them. But you can use, as they've mentioned in our presentation today, the Gallup. You've got the Willis Towers.
Watson.
Thank you, Watson. They just keep combining.
Yeah, they keep merging.
But there's a lot out there that really show that these recognition programs actually do give the ROI that people are looking for. In the end result, it actually costs less more times than not when I've done my analysis, because you're actually truly improving the bottom line through higher productivity, and you're eliminating wasteful programs that are ineffective.
And your recognition program's launch is extremely important. Get off to a strong start. And it's also an opportunity not to be missed. Tell people that what you think they do every day is important and worthwhile.
All right. Well, now we would love to take your questions. So I think Maya has been collecting questions that have been submitted from our audience here. And also, if you want some one-on-one time to talk with us in more detail, please feel free to chat with Emily and members of her team by requesting a demo.
And if they do something great, feel free to send me an email. I'll give them a bonus.
All right, Maya, do you want to feed us some questions coming in from the audience?
Sure, Raph, no problem. So Nikki DeRoche asks, how much do you budget per employee per year for recognition? Do managers have dollar limits on what they can give out?
That's a great question. Of course, budgets are always really important. I think there's probably a pretty wide range here. Carol, do you have any numbers off the top of your head? And then we can share the experience of our customers as well.
Yeah, so I mean, we actually try to budget. Some companies budget anywhere between, let's call it $20, depending on how the points program works, all the way up to maybe $500. When we did our analysis for my global company that I used in the example, we had actually been spending close to about $300 per employee for all the different recognition programs that we had throughout the world. And so when we actually implemented our system, we basically stated that we wanted to offer up about $100 per employee, which therefore was a cost savings. And should we go over, we still knew that we were going to be below what our actual spend was. You've really just got to see what the value of your employee engagement is. When I did the same type of ROI with a new HRIS system, we looked at what it was on a per employee basis for all of that technology and empowering the employee and the managers. And you've just got to see what is the investment you're willing to put in so that your employees are retained and you reduce all those other costs around turnover. And then you'll find that number that you're willing to start with. And then as you see your own bottom line increase, I would always ask that you reinvest into your employees.
Yeah, and those numbers you were quoting, those were annual. So you said, anywhere from $20 to $500 per employee per year.
Yes.
Yeah, and that the company you were at before, you were spending $300 per employee per year on disparate programs, and were able to unify that into a more cohesive program for $100 per employee per year.
That is correct, and we were actually able to add more things that we've always wanted to highlight and recognize through a single system, a more unified approach.
Yeah.
Can I add on to that really quick? Yeah. My experience is very much piggybacks off that, which is that to justify the budget, the more programs you can bring into it, the better. So just recognition, I think, has its own case. And to make it even stronger, if you have, wellness, sales incentives, CS incentives, end of year recognition, And you bring it all into one roof, that builds a really, really strong case that'll impact a lot of people.
Great. Yeah, and just to echo, what we see among our customers is pretty much lines exactly with what Carol said. Our customers typically spend somewhere between $5 per employee per month, which is $60 per employee per year, up to maybe $20 per employee per month, which would be about $240 per employee per year.
Yeah, I'd say it scales a lot too, how much people want to put into it. There's like, we can set up a minimum impact program, like the most, what you need to have an effective program. But then as people get really into Bonusly, they tend to add more and more incentive, for different things they want to bring in, different initiatives.
Yep. Great. Maya, how about another question?
Sure. So we have Patrick McCoubry, who wrote in and asked, are there downsides to having too many recognition initiatives or tools? For example, we have 3 surveys, value-aligned brags, a pretty competitive compensation package, etc.
Great question. Well, Carol, would you like to jump in on this one? I think you've been in a lot of places with a lot of disparate programs, and talk on that.
Yeah, I would say that when you're talking compensation, that in and of itself is a separate component. You need to stay up with the market and decide what kind of comp philosophy you ultimately want to espouse, if you want to be at market, a leader, or a lagger. So I kind of put that in a separate little bucket. Can there be too many? Yes, because then they all become watered down. There's not one that's valued more than the other, or you find that they aren't well maintained, well communicated. They're not highly engaged. You forget to publicize and or market all of them. And I think that by having a more unified approach, you create something that's better aligned to strategy. It's also a lot easier way to roll out new initiatives. If you are wanting to roll out a new sales program and you want to basically say, the first 10 people to sell X, Y, and Z get so many points. You've got a platform from which to do that, and you're not trying to run after things through accounts payables. So I would say that too many programs is definitely not the way to go. And if you can find a way to wrap it up in one pretty package, you're going to find it to be way more effective.
Great. Yeah, I couldn't say it better. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Carol. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Maya, hit us with the next one.
Awesome. Okay, so Finesse George asked this earlier on in the conversation when Carol was talking about the barbecue, and just wondered if Carol can give some specific low-cost recognition program ideas you recommend. Finesse says she likes the idea of a potluck versus a barbecue.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some organizations, I find a great way to do it is when you're community-based, or if you're focusing on corporate social awareness. If you do a potluck, do it as a way to create a volunteer opportunity. Reward people for coming to that program and helping out the Red Cross pack backpacks or something. Those don't cost you anything. It actually brings a community to the company, and you're all having a shared purpose. So I would say there are lots of low cost or no cost ideas to help to build the right culture. And then if you have the opportunity to put together a platform or recognition program for those who do participate, again, you're enforcing and or enhancing the behaviors that you ultimately want to see your employees espouse.
Very cool.
Yeah, a quick word of warning from my experience is that a lot of times when people set up very, very low cost programs, the cost is their time. So just to watch out for, if you're spending a lot of time trying to save the company money and it's hard for you to do other parts of your work, just keep in mind that you should find a way to optimize that and make sure that your time isn't the cost savings.
Yeah, I remember in the early days of Bonusly having a call with someone, just kind of an informational call to learn about how she was running recognition at her company. and she told me that they had a kind of a completely homegrown kind of manual recognition program that she managed out of a spreadsheet. And it was costing her 10 to 20 hours per week to run this program. And just thinking about the cost of that person's salary and benefits, and the opportunity cost of that person, working on a spreadsheet versus doing other more valuable, tasks as the, head of HR for a relatively large organization. It was this incredible cost, but it wasn't showing up on any line items because it was, the cost was being borne in terms of this person's time.
Exactly. I see it all the time. The free programs, we just do it ourselves. They're not free. It's not.
They're not.
They're not.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say there are two more questions that kind of piggyback on this question of making the most of your time and your money. Justina Casillas asks, how do you sustain a recognition program? And Lena Troiano asks, what have you seen as the most effective programs? A point system to purchase items, peer-to-peer, etc.
Great. Carol, you want to take first stab at that?
So how to sustain it? I think I've given a couple ideas through the presentation. You kind of have to think about reinventing it, new communications, maybe stepping out of the box away from the technology and then trying to find ways to drive people back to the technology. It definitely has to be an organic, iterative process. Maybe you don't do a full big bang at the beginning and you find, what the system and our program you ultimately would love to have, but then roll it out so that you're not overwhelming your employee population. That way it keeps it vital and vibrant and you get to see how it can grow and then try to make sure that the communications are strong. As far as the second question, and then I'll throw it back to you, Raf, is I find that the top down it's not as effective. I'm not going to say it's ineffective. It's not as effective, but I will find that peer-to-peer is most effective because you see what your employee sitting next to you does every single day, and the ability to give them a pat on the back and show them the recognition through a system so that all people can see what they're doing is really awesome. I think that we forget sometimes that it takes all of us to really make a company successful. There's a lot of onus put on leadership, and sometimes the employees think that they're just a cog in a wheel sometimes, but the recognition programs are really what helps to point out that the employee is most important, and leaders are there to facilitate good work from others. So I think that it's important that you if you can, to create a program that is all inclusive, not just top down.
Yeah, those are great points. And I would just circle back to those kind of 5 elements of effective recognition, that it's timely and frequent, that it's inclusive of everyone, that it's visible, that's aligned with values, and that it's specifically recognizing behaviors and accomplishments. And I think with those characteristics, you can have a mix of a variety of kinds of recognition. And I agree. I think peer-to-peer is probably in isolation the strongest form, but if you have a strong peer-to-peer program, you can layer on other forms of recognition, and those will actually be made more effective by tying into an existing peer-to-peer system. I wouldn't say you just need peer-to-peer, but there's that might be a great starting point, and then you can layer on other forms of recognition as well. And just keeping an eye on hitting those 5 elements of effective recognition, and that's what'll work for you.
I want to add one thing to that for sustaining. If you aren't gathering data about who's being recognized, that's a pretty big missed opportunity. What we do here is, we take our best guess at designing a perfect recognition program, but we can, we can only do so much as we get to know someone through the sales process. So after they launch, we're going to go through our analytics and say, this team isn't recognized as much. What's going on here? And if you have analytics to back up your recognition program, your active learning and evolution of the program will be a lot easier. One example is, for the sales team, I felt that since we didn't collaborate as much peer-to-peer, there was a missing element, sales feedback from our customers. And same for customer success. You want to have customer feedback in your customer success recognition. And so analytics is actually how I came up with that idea. I was looking at it and like, oh, this is a missed opportunity. So that would be my advice for the evolution and sustaining of engagement, is to have analytics to guide your brainstorming.
Great. And there's just one last question we'll get to, and then we'll sign off. I'll actually go to our thank you slide right now so that's there. But there was one last question about, with peer-to-peer recognition, do you find that people constantly recognize their friends as opposed to those who really deserve it? This is probably one of the most common objections or fears that we hear from people before adopting peer-to-peer recognition. I don't usually see that. And one of the reasons you don't see that is if you implement a recognition program that is also visible, it's very obvious if people are not being good citizens in the program. And so that transparency, that visibility of the system make it strongly incentivize good behavior and recognizing people who have actually contributed rather than trying to just dump your points to friends. Carol, I don't know if you've seen any of that as well when you've implemented peer-to-peer recognition.
Yeah, the concept that it's visible to everybody is really what kind of moderates them. But I'm not going to say that we didn't see people do that a little bit, but they're very self-regulating. People call their friends out pretty quickly. And if we felt that there was ever an abuse, we would address it, but we really didn't see a huge problem. But it is something to obviously be cognizant of and just be aware of it. And many systems will allow you, from an administrator standpoint, to really run those analytics, as Emily has said, to see if you've got any, bad eggs in the basket, and then you can address them one-on-one.
Yeah, that's a great
point. And if you have a bad apple on a team or in an organization, at least you found them.
Yeah.
Now you can. They're visible now. Yeah. You can have a conversation.
Okay, well, we are 2 minutes over, so thank you everyone for sticking with us. You had some very excellent questions. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to HR.com for hosting us. Thank you very much, Carol Fraser, for joining us and contributing your expertise as our subject matter expert. We have some additional information here if you want to email us or visit our website. And you can also just Google cost of employee turnover calculator to calculate your own cost of turnover at your organization if you're interested in doing that. And that's all, folks. Thank you.
And this concludes our webcast today, and I'd like to thank our presenters. That was great, very engaging, really enjoyed it, and I'm sure the audience did too. And to our audience, if you would like to view this again, the recording will be up on our site in our archives. For free members, it's up for you for 7 days to view, and if you have a recertification membership, then please feel free to watch it at any time. Your webcast credit will show up in your HR.com account, and you'll also be getting an email with that information in it sometime tomorrow. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a moment to fill in the final evaluation survey that will pop up on your screen when this concludes, and enjoy the rest of your day.